Hello, how are you? We have a little bit of a different scenery today, and I'm here for a book review, Good Boundaries and Goodbyes by Lisa TerKeurst. Oh, I love the sound of that breeze. Hopefully it's not too distracting. We're on a little bit of a weekend getaway here. We've got the Allegheny River behind us. With book reviews, I want to share the entire book with you, so it's hard to kind of pick and choose what to share or how to share. I'll leave a link in the description box below with you can purchase this book on Amazon, so it's about $15 for hardcover. So I'll just read what it says here. It says, relationships are wonderful until they're not. Join #1 New York Times bestseller author Lisa TerKeurst. I have tons of books that are by Lisa, and I've loved all of them. So if you're not familiar with her, it's just a ton of great titles. As she helps you stop the dysfunction of unhealthy relationships by showing you biblical ways to set boundaries and, when necessary, say goodbye without losing the best of who you are. As a Christian, I think sometimes we find that the hardest thing, because we feel like we're supposed to be at peace with everybody and do whatever it takes to make things work and to make other people happy, and that's not always the case. It's not always what's best. It says, is it unloving or selfish to set a boundary? Are Christians ever called to walk away from a relationship that's no longer safe or sustainable? Lisa TerKeurst deeply understands these hard questions in the midst of relational struggles. So if you're not aware, Lisa has recently gone through a divorce, and not that the entire book is on that. The interesting thing is, sometimes when I do book reviews, I'll be like, if you're going through this or experiencing this or want wisdom on this particular topic, I would recommend this book. But with this, I can't think of anyone that wouldn't benefit from this. Just reading through it, I was thinking of all sorts of different relationships that I've either had in the past or have now, relationships with relatives, co-workers. It all just fits in, and it's just wonderful information to know and to have as we navigate some relationships that become difficult. There's a boat behind me fishing. There has not been anybody out here, and then as soon as I came out, this boat shows up to fish. Hi. All right, we're just gonna keep going. Wouldn't that be exciting if they catch a fish in the background? So on the inside here, it says, you want to save the relationship and get to a better place more than anything, but you finally realize if they don't want to change, you cannot change them. That's hard. And now you're secretly starting to wonder if you are the crazy one. Friend, you may be brokenhearted, you may be sad, you may be afraid and possibly angry. You may be fixated on trying to fix what isn't within your ability to fix, but you are not crazy. If you are smelling smoke, there is a fire. And the only reasonable option at this point is to either put the fire out or get yourself out of the fire. I love that, because sometimes, not everybody smells the smoke, but you can smell it, and you can start to think like you're crazy. And if you can't get the fire out, you gotta get out. So I'm just gonna start to flip through a little bit and maybe share some of the things that I highlighted or some of the things that really resonated with me. So in the beginning, kind of put a box around this whole paragraph here, and it says, now this is where I want to look straight into your eyes and say something really important. This isn't a book about leaving people. It's a book about loving people in right and healthy ways, and it's about communicating appropriate boundaries and parameters so that love can stay safe and sustainable. Boundaries aren't meant to shove love away, quite the opposite. We set boundaries so we know what to do when we very much want to love those around us really well without losing ourselves in the process. Good boundaries help us preserve the love within us, even when some relationships become unsustainable and we must accept the reality of goodbye. And here's a part kind of like what I mentioned before. It says, I had the wrong notion that to be a Christian requires that we believe the best no matter what, that it's unkind to draw boundaries, that it's noble and commendable to stay in a relationship no matter what. I no longer believe that. This part here, talking about if you're in a relationship with someone who is struggling with an addiction of some sort, it says, what if I rescued him this time and it finally turned everything around? Or what if I don't rescue him and something terrible happens? Will I regret this for the rest of my life? Is there anything else I can do? Yet because of all the wise counsel I'd gotten, there was nothing else to do, and it felt like a shameful defeat to me. It's hard to own what you don't choose. I knew I shouldn't own the repercussions of addictions that weren't mine, but when your life is so tightly woven into a collective fabric of a close relationship, it can be excruciatingly maddening To watch someone choose things you know are destructive. Though their choices are their own, the consequences have an impact on everyone who loves them. Much like exploding hand grenades. You don't have to be the one to pull the pin to be deeply devastated by the resulting shrapnel. They will tell you that the blue sky is orange, that the orange car is green, and their glass is full of one thing when you absolutely know it's something else. If you go with what they say, you'll become more and more convinced you're the problem. If you oppose what they say, they will make sure you are definitely the problem. Either way, you lose. And I was losing my health, my emotional well-being, and even if I didn't want to admit it, my marriage. So now the only real choice I had to make was whether or not to lose with my sanity intact. She says, I realize that more severe issues like addiction may not be what's making some of your relationships incredibly challenging. There are so many reasons relationships can start to slip from being healthy to unhealthy, or at least from fulfilling to frustrating. Relationships are wonderful until they're not. But most of us aren't nearly as equipped as we need to be to know what to do when we know things need to change, but the other person isn't willing or capable of cooperating with the needed changes. All relationships can be difficult at times, but they should not be destructive to your well-being. If you have relationships in your life where you know something is wrong, but you can't for the life of you figure out what to do, I believe you'll quickly find the reason you need this book. I understand what it feels like to have your body tense and your pulse quicken while your mind is screaming at the other person, stop doing this. You've prayed about this behavior or situation, you've talked about this, you've tried to navigate it. You may have even tried to stop it, but in the end, nothing has worked. It is not unchristian to require people to treat you in healthy ways, and for us to do the same for others. It's not unchristian to call things wrong and hurtful things hurtful. We can do it all with honor, kindness, and love, but we have to know how to spot dysfunction, what to do about it, and when to recognize it's no longer reasonable or safe to stay in some relationships. Even just thinking, having a presence on social media or a YouTube channel, I haven't had to deal with this a lot, but there's always some people that creep in, and we call them the trolls, being really disrespectful. And it's interesting because, as a Christian, it's like, oh, well, turn the other cheek or just treat them with kindness. But I come at it from this angle where it's not unchristian to require people to treat you in healthy ways. And I've said several times to people, like, if you cannot treat me or others with respect, you will be blocked. Like, you can't be here. So kind of the same thing of you can require that people treat you in a healthy way. And if they don't, then they lose access to you. So talking about like friendships, I said I didn't know what to do anymore. No matter how much I wanted this friendship to work, it wasn't working. Parts of it were good, but then the parts that weren't working were happening over and over. I was spending so much emotional energy trying to avoid another issue that it was becoming increasingly challenging to even enjoy the good times. The real issue was I started to resent the amount of emotional access to my life I had given her. If you are a highlighting kind of person, which I am, swipe some yellow across that word access. It's a big one. It's especially big if we are knee-deep in a close relationship and we start feeling unheard, unsafe, uncared for, taken advantage of, or made to pay consequences for choices that we had no control over. I've never heard someone say she is so selfish and unchristian for not freely giving out her keys and passwords to her whole neighborhood. Just because someone lives close by doesn't mean we can assume they will be responsible with complete access. It says, now instead of feeling stuck because I can't control the choices of the other person, I take control of reducing the access to the level of responsibility they are capable of. That solution is called a boundary. This one here, so this is something I've done personally for things. It says if you don't want details shared, you'll have to reduce, again, that word access, reduce the access you give to the more private aspects of your life. This may include deciding ahead of time what topics you are willing to talk about when you get together and not deviating from that decision in a moment of vulnerability. Yeah, so there's some things with certain people and certain topics that it will go south very quickly. So in my mind, I already know, we are not discussing this topic. It's been a good thing. She says, I posted this question on Instagram the other night. Why is it that a red flag literally has to be on fire before I tilt my head and say, might it be red? If it's red, it's red. If someone's actions toward me are hurting me, they're hurting me. If it's concerning, it's concerning. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And we should be willing to give grace for mistakes. But if the issues are ongoing and continuously harmful, we must acknowledge that and act accordingly. It's not that we don't want to be prayerful and hopeful and eager for positive changes in the other person's life, but we don't want to become so eager and overcommitted to their health that we stay undercommitted to our own. So there's some good advice here about maybe like how to steer a conversation if you can like feel it's going south. And I thought this was a good one. So politics are always a hot topic. So here was a good response. It says, I can tell you care a lot about politics and the issues you are passionate about. Thank you for wanting to share all your thoughts with me. But I'm in a place right now where I need to guard my heart from the intensity that can sometimes arise in these kinds of discussions. Thank you for understanding that if the conversation about certain topics gets too heated, I'll either need to redirect the conversation to less triggering subjects, or we will have to hit the pause button. This one here, if you're dealing with someone, again, with an addiction or just any unacceptable behavior, if they are just like completely disrespectful to you, here's a good one. It says, I love you and I care about you, and at the same time there are some behaviors that are requiring me to make changes to our relationship. So just pausing for a second, and this was something she talked about in the book too. When you're setting these boundaries, it's not really a discussion with the person, not like, hey, what do you think about this? More likely than not, they're not gonna like the boundary. So it's more like you're saying like, this is what it is. It says, when you insert the unacceptable behavior, substance abuse, or addiction, when you do this in my presence, it affects me in ways that I am no longer willing to accept. This isn't an accusation or judgment against you. You're an adult and your choices are your own. This is me being proactive about my well-being and making wise choices for myself. So I am requesting that you no longer use these substances or insert other unhealthy behavior. I'm requesting that you no longer do this around me or in my home. If you are unable to agree to these parameters, then we'll need to limit our interactions and I can no longer have you visit my home. Again, this is because I care not only about my well-being, but also about keeping our relationship in a more sustainable place. So I can really relate to that one, debating on how much to share. So I just turned 40 a couple months ago. So I've had to set a lot of boundaries with my parents in different ways. So they're divorced, two completely, different people, two completely different sets of boundaries for different reasons. But I've had to put boundaries in place. And I don't know, my dad can have a bit of a temper and just can be really mean and get disrespectful. I don't really know if he realizes it. So a lot of people that know him, it's just like, oh, that's just the way he is. And now that I'm older and, live away from home, far away from home, I visit a couple times a year, so it's manageable. But when those same behaviors start to come out, again, when I was growing up, it was hard. But now I'm in a much healthier place where I'm like, no, I'm not going to tolerate being treated like that. Can I change the way he treats me? No, like that's his choice. And I'll say like, I love him, he loves me. We're fine there. But some of the day-to-day interactions can get prickly. So on the last trip that I was out there, same thing. He got irritated and was just really, really mean and disrespectful, and I left. So we live 5 hours away, from there, and things had gotten a little heated, and he retreated into his room, and I said to my husband, I said, I want to go. And he didn't think I was serious at first, and I'm like, we're going, and I quickly packed up my bags and wasn't gonna say goodbye. Got in the Jeep. I was crying. And right as we were pulling out, he came out to the door and we just pulled out and left. And I was crying for probably 2 hours into the trip. It was the hardest thing. Kind of let the dust settle, but then I followed up with, I am not going to tolerate being treated like this. So if this is how I'm treated, I'm not tolerating it. I'm leaving, which is what I had done. I have not been back out there yet, but we've been in communication. And it doesn't feel good to say that or to set that boundary with someone you love, but it turned out to be a really, really good thing, where I think we both took a step back, and, he's eager to have us come back. We're going back out in a couple of weeks to visit, and it'll be our first time back out there. And I think it really hit home, how hurtful like the words could be, and you know, that kind of thing. But I really have high hopes for the future of our relationship. Like, I think it's going to be a lot better. So yeah, so I could relate to that one. This was another one I highlighted. So Lisa had wrote another book called, I think it was Your Best Yes. If you're one of those people that have trouble like saying no to people, here's a good response. This is, thank you so much for considering me. While my heart always wants to say yes to opportunities, the reality of my time requires me to say no. Again, I'm honored you thought of me, and I hope your, mention the activity, goes incredibly well. Thank you for understanding, and as always, I'm cheering you on. That's a good one I need to tuck away. And there's some other ones there. I think that was really helpful. There's a decent portion that talks about wives setting boundaries when they find their husband has an addiction to pornography. And I'm not sure, she doesn't come right out and say that that was the issue in her marriage. But the way she talks about it, I mean, it seems like she's really speaking from the heart. But either way, I found, I'm just going to read this here. It says, there are countless married women who have reached out to me brokenhearted and feeling paralyzed because of their husband's struggle with pornography and refusal to get help. Often the wife tries to draw a boundary by saying she can no longer allow this issue to go unaddressed. She declares that she will be going to a counselor to help her process the trauma this is causing to her heart. If her husband would like to join her and work on a healthy solution, then together they can move toward healing. And just on that part alone, like, I would absolutely recommend, like, if you're a woman kind of stuck in that scenario, for you to go meet with a counselor. And you could be like, well, he's the one that needs help. It's helpful. It would be helpful to receive help for you of knowing how to set those boundaries for yourself to minimize the damage to you as you move forward with or without them. If her husband refuses, she tells him that in order to pursue healing for herself, she will need to make some changes. Then she works with her counselor on the necessary boundaries and consequences to keep her heart protected and to keep her from feeling devastated by her husband's actions. She knows boundaries aren't meant to change her husband, force him to see things the way she does, or even teach him lessons. Of course, she wants her husband to stop watching porn, but he has to make that change for himself. So her boundaries are to help her manage the hurt without constantly losing her temper or getting filled with bitter resentment. But here's where all of this could fall apart. The wife draws necessary boundaries and her husband lashes back. It's no wonder I watch porn. Look at what a nag you are. You are so dramatic. This isn't even that big of a deal. All men do this. I can't even trust you with my struggles because you're always looking to find something wrong with me. And you think this little boundary tactic is going to make me more attracted to you? No, it just shows me I'm justified because you don't care about my needs. She's brokenhearted over everything he says. She loves her husband. She's afraid of losing him. She feels so alone. She doesn't feel like she can tell anyone. Now, not only does she have the hurt of his betrayal, but she starts to question if she is really to blame. She wonders, am I trustworthy? Am I overdramatic? Am I so overbearing that I'm the one pushing him to do this? So she drops the boundary, trying to prove to him that she's none of these things he accused her of, hoping things will get better. But she doesn't realize that in dropping the boundary, the real issue of her husband watching porn goes unaddressed. She's the only one bearing the consequences of his choices, and the cycle of hurt from his actions will most likely continue. She will end up devastated, angry, and feeling like a hostage in a situation that never gets better. So again, there's more on that, but I think that's a really common thing. And if you're familiar with my story, so I was the one that had the pornography addiction. So I get the struggle, I get the addiction, and it's a mess. Like, it can be a mess, but they have to want to change on their own. We can't control what others believe. We can't control what others feel. We can't control what others do, but we can control and be responsible for ourselves. As we've discussed before, boundaries aren't meant to control another person. Boundaries make it possible for us to hold ourselves together. There's a chapter here. So chapter 10 says, can a goodbye ever really be good? And there was something interesting here that I learned. Here it says, it's interesting that the original phrase in the late 1500s was God be with ye. The contraction of that phrase was God by, Godbwye, which eventually became goodbye. I've sat with the thought of goodbye as being more of a sending off with God rather than a slammed door, a contact deleted, and a puddle of angst. Is it possible for a goodbye to be more than a good riddance with a huff of disgust? I wonder when Jesus watched the rich young ruler walk away, what was the look in his eyes? I wonder when Peter denied Jesus and abandoned him just before Jesus went to the cross, what was that goodbye like? A goodbye Jesus surely whispered through a busted up body and a broken heart. I wonder what it was like when Judas, with a heart full of betrayal, kissed Jesus' cheek, sold him out, and then wound up hanging himself. How did Jesus say goodbye? I'll never really know on this side of eternity. But I have a thought. I think Jesus said goodbye the same way he lived all the days before the hurt, betrayal, rejection, and abandonment. While the relationship certainly changed, he didn't let the goodbye change him. He let people walk away without letting go of who he was. Even when people turned on Jesus, he didn't let a goodbye turn him into someone he was never meant to be. And while I'll be the first one to admit I'm nowhere close to the purity and perfection of Jesus, I also don't want my goodbyes to make it look like I've never spent any time with Jesus at all. Yeah, I feel that one. Chapter 11, that was a good one. It says, I'm not walking away, I'm accepting reality. Ooh, it's starting to rain a little bit. She said, like I taught in my book, Forgiving What You Can't Forget. I own that book. I have not read it yet. That should be a good one too. Forgiving What You Can't Forget. We can make the choice to forgive the one who hurt us for the facts of what happened. But then we also must walk through the much longer process of forgiving and healing from the impact another person's actions have had on us. Forgiveness is a command by God, but reconciliation should be very conditional on many factors. Most of all, whether all parties involved can stay safe and healthy if they stay together. And if reality is telling you you've done all that you can do, what comes next? You've made big changes, you've prayed, you've sought wise counsel, you've had the conversations, you've set the boundaries, you've implemented the consequence, you've set even more clearly defined boundaries, and yet it's not working. The neighbor is still showing up at your house borrowing things out of your garage without asking. The family member is still coming to gatherings drunk. The friend is still making unrealistic demands and berating you for not doing what they want. The guy you are dating, who says he's a committed believer, is still making inappropriate comments and trying to make you feel guilty for not sleeping with him. Remember, all the work you've done to draw boundaries was not about controlling someone else's behavior. It's about paying attention and being honest about how someone's poor behavior and lack of responsibility is possibly controlling you. When a relationship shifts from being difficult to being destructive, it's the right time to consider a goodbye. So I'm going to end there. Again, that's just a lot of the stuff that I had highlighted. But if you can relate to any of that, again, this is Lisa Turkhurst, Good Boundaries and Goodbyes. I'll leave the link below, but I definitely recommend it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.